we're going to go ahead and start. Thank you for coming and welcome to the Collegium keynote presentation. I want to introduce Heath Lawson. He's known in the SCA as Viscount Bato. He was born at Cuby Point Naval Hospital in Subic Bay, the Philippines in 19... When his father was discharged from the Navy, his family moved to Spotsylvania, Virginia, and in 1979 moved to Medford, Oregon. He's lived most of his life in Oregon, with the exception of his own military service, where he was primarily stationed at the submarine base Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. He has a Bachelor of Science in History from Southern Oregon University and a law degree from Willamette University College of Law. Bato began his SCA career in 2001 in the Barony of Tir. He was knighted in September of 2006. 5 years, that's not bad. It's not bad, especially for one spend squires. And from 2007 to 2011, he and his wife, Emma von Bern, served as territorial baron and baroness. In June 2022 to December 2022, he and Emma were fortunate enough to have the opportunity to serve as Prince and Princess of the Summits. Heath's SCA persona has changed over the years from an 11th century Norman named Roland Le Brun to a 16th century Swiss Landsknecht named Roland von Bern, and now a 16th century Visayan Datu, which is a chieftain named Bato. Just before the COVID-19 pandemic, Heath began to return to actively participating in the SCA after a long break. And when the pandemic happened, he decided to use the time to research and create a new Viking era persona because the garb was easier to pack than Landsknecht. In the process, he came across some photos on the internet of a Filipino shield, which I had the pleasure to witness at the beginning of that journey, which began the beginning of a wide survey of information about pre-colonial Philippines or Filipino culture. Concurrently, the SCA changed the mission statement of the organization to not be limited to Western culture. When not doing SCA activities, Heath loves to spend his time with his family, with his friends, sharing good food, good drink, playing Dungeons and Dragons, and spending time with his wife and his dogs, Paladin and Pokey. So may I present Viscount Bato.
All right, good morning. So this morning we're going to start off with your morning Filipino language lesson. Mabuhay. Mabuhay. So that is said as an exclamation, and it means long life or live long. And when we were Prince and Princess, we utilized that as kind of like our cheer. And we also have in Tagalog, kamusta, or kamusta kayo. So kamusta means hello, and it sounds very reminiscent of the Spanish word. What is it? What is hello in Spanish? Hola. No, it's ¿Cómo está? ¿Cómo está? How are you? And so ¿Cómo está? Kamusta kayo is how are you? So up here we have mabuhay. We also have maraming salamat. Maraming salamat means thank you very much. And po is a sign of respect, usually for elders, but just a sign of respect. So it is very much thank you, I respect you. So maraming salamat for attending this presentation. Good morning. Magandang umaga po. So that is in Tagalog. In Visayan, there's a different word or a different saying. It's maayong buntag, which is good morning in Visayan. And the reason I bring that to your attention is languages are completely different throughout the Filipino archipelago. And that is one of the things that marks the fact that it is a very diverse region, and I think that will help us understand why researching the pre-colonial Philippines is especially challenging. And so this presentation, I'm going to go back to the title, is Challenges and Rewards of Developing a Non-Western European Persona. And these are my experiences developing and researching a pre-17th century Filipino Visayan persona for the SCA. I want to start off with some gratitudes and acknowledgments. I think it's good to start off at this point. Number one, I'm very thankful for my wife. Without her, I wouldn't be here, and she supports my crazy and all kinds of different things. Next, I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to all of you today, largely because I am totally geeked out about sharing my research and my culture. And thank you to SteerCar for asking me. I'm very, very honored to be here. Next, I want to say I'm thankful for the SCA. And the reason I'm thankful for the SCA is because it gives me, oops, sorry. Wrong. Here it is. It gives me an opportunity and a place to safely explore my culture and the history of my culture. And I can run around in the summertime in a bahag or a loincloth, and people don't look at me like I'm completely crazy, because you all are just as crazy wearing the earrings. I'm also thankful for the changes the SCA made to Corpora within the last several years. I joined the SCA because I'm a history nerd, and I have a history degree, and I love the idea of knights in shining armor and studying Western European Middle Ages. That drew me to this organization, and I'm great with that, and that's why I enjoyed the organization. However, with the changes, it just gave me an opportunity. I'm also a compulsive rule follower, and I wanted to fit in with what the scope of the organization was. Next, I never understood growing up why people said they were going to get out of high school or get out of college and they were going to go off, hike Europe and find themselves or discover themselves. I didn't know what that meant. And I still really don't know what that means, other than my experience doing this research into my Filipino culture kind of gives me an inkling of what they were looking for, what they're out there searching for. I'm discovering things about not necessarily myself, but my ancestors and the culture and the things that I never really knew about the Philippines and the Filipino culture and its history and how I got where I am today. Finally, I love my mom. And I'll get back to that. But just please remember, I love my mom very much. So when I was preparing this, I drafted this presentation and deleted it probably 1,000 times because I didn't really know what I was going to say. I just knew that there was a lot of research that I've done, and a lot of it might not be interesting to a lot of people. And when SteerCar asked me, would you talk about your experiences doing this kind of research and your research? I was like, yeah, okay. And then I started looking at all of my past research, and it's all about the culture. And I know a lot of people probably want to learn or hear about pre-colonial Filipino culture, and we'll get into some of that if we have time. But really, I want to talk about the experiences within the SCA and doing research on something that is not the norm of the mainstream SCA, right? And what is that like, and how is that being received? All right. So I think SteerCar kind of covered a lot of this, but who am I and why am I up here? Well, a little bit about me. I'm 50 years old. I'm almost 51. I live in Oregon. I'm married. I've got 2 grown children, 3 dogs, a bunch of lizards. Um, I'm a veteran of the United States Navy, the submarine force. I was an Eagle Scout, or I am an Eagle Scout. I was a high school wrestler. I love playing role-playing games with my friends. I have a bachelor's degree in history, a law degree. I work in HR for the state of Oregon. And like I said, I'm a compulsive rule follower. And so, and that's probably why I'm in HR, right? And so when I joined the SCA, I wanted to follow the rules, and the rules were it's a pre-17th century European persona, and I want to be very clear: no one ever made me feel like I didn't belong, right? No one ever said, "Hey, why is this brown guy at in the SCA and trying to be whatever European persona?" And no one ever said that. I've always felt accepted, and I'm fortunate. I know other people's experiences aren't like that, but I can only share my experiences. I participated in the SCA for a bit over 20 years. I was born in the Philippines. I was raised here in the States. I grew up in Southern Oregon, in Eagle Point, where a lot of people would probably suspect that I ran into racism. I'm going to tell you right now, I had a wonderful childhood. I never experienced that. The first time I really experienced that was when I was in Hawaii and I was in the service, and it was because I was married to a white woman. And it was odd. It was odd. And maybe, I'm going to throw this out there, maybe I have experienced that. And I don't want to make this about racism, but I think it's important to explain where I'm coming from. Maybe I have experienced it, but I'm just so oblivious because I see the good in people, right? And I just accept people for people. So, but I don't think that my race has ever really hindered me in the SCA. At least I don't think so. But this opportunity to research my culture in the SCA now that the rules have changed, right? I have never been growing up in southern rural Oregon close to a Filipino community, right? It's my mom and my sister and me and my aunt and my cousin, right? But that's about it. Are there other Filipinos? Yes, absolutely. They're all over the place. Can't swing a dead cat without hitting the Filipinos. Sure. But I just don't. I just have not been part of that community, and so this gave me an opportunity to learn about that. Hit the wrong button. All right. So my goals in this research over time is to build a body of work and knowledge that helps me better understand the pre-colonial Filipino and specifically the Visayan culture. And I'll go over what that means in a bit when I explain the geography of the Philippines. To research and recreate arts and items of the late pre-colonial period through contact in 1521 until 1600. So the explorer Magellan landed in the Philippines in May 21st of 1521. And that was the first European contact with the Filipino archipelago. Now, I'll have you know that the Philippines had lots of contact with outsiders prior to that. The Arab traders had been in the Philippines for thousands of years already. The Chinese have been trading with the Philippines for a long, long time. The Filipinos had been raiding the beaches of China for a long time. So the Philippines was and is still to this day kind of a crossroads of maritime trade. But I'm really focusing on really a very close time period of the right before the contact with Magellan. Finally, to come up with some reasoned conclusions about the various aspects of pre-colonial Visayan life by comparing and analyzing widely differing and conflicting sources of information that have been developed over and because of 500 years of colonization by various countries and eons of diverse cultural interactions and influences across the Philippine archipelago. So the Philippines has been dominated for 300 years by the Spanish, by 40-something years, 49 years, I think, 44 years, by the United States. They were occupied by the Japanese during World War II. There was a long period of internal dictatorship by Marcos, President Marcos, right? Ferdinand Marcos. So all of those things have coalesced to impact the identity of this this archipelago and the national identity and impact their understanding of their history. All right. Now back to I love my mom. So my mom, she's beautiful. She just turned 75 years old this month. She's from a little town called Matao on the island of Baliran, which is a tiny, tiny island on the north end of Leyte. And she left her family in the Philippines to provide a better life for me, and she came with my dad, and she has sacrificed a lot for our family. She came here with the intent to go to school, but she took care of her family. She was a housewife, and then she worked at Burger King for 30 years, a miserable occupation, and left there with nothing. They booted her out without a retirement, which was a crime. But she always put her family first, and I love her dearly. And I will never be able to fully convey what she has done for me and my family. So, and I'll always be grateful to her. And the reason it's important to you to understand that I love my mom is because in 2020 I had an epiphany. I realized that my family has certain traditions, and we do things like make lumpia and pancit for weddings and birthdays, right? We use certain Tagalog words to describe things, right? And I look at my kids, and I'm married to a white woman, and I love her, and there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't matter to me, except for my kids are half white, right? And their kids, when they have kids, will be a quarter Filipino, or I mean less, eighth of Filipino, and because they've married, non-Filipino people. And over time, while down through the generations, the likelihood of them, my grandchildren marrying another Filipino, that's pretty slim, right? I mean, it could happen, but I just imagine down the road, there will be a time where the Lawson family has a Thanksgiving, and they have some kid wondering, why are we eating lumpia at Thanksgiving? I mean, what is this? Or why do we do this? And there won't be any real recognition that my mom ever existed in this country. And it broke my heart. And I don't speak Tagalog. I know nothing about my family in the Philippines. We really distanced ourselves from them. I've been there once. My grandfather's gone. My grandmother died when my mom was little. And so I know very little about my culture and my heritage. So it became very important to me. It was a way to preserve my mom, I think. And so it also helped me understand where she came from. Like I said, I went to the Philippines one time. I was born there, but we left shortly after I was born, moved to Japan, lived there for a bit, and then moved to the United States. For all intents and purposes, my culture is completely American culture. I mean, I am an American. I mean, I like America's Got Talent, that kind of thing. I watch AGT or whatever. I like fast cars. I like to be able to drive. Rock and roll and Bruce Springsteen. So, but when I went to the Philippines, I was an 18-year-old kid right out of high school, and I guarantee you, I did not appreciate what my mom provided me, the opportunity to learn. I mean, I got to see and do some cool things, but I really did not delve into the value of the culture because I was just a stupid American teenager. And now, I try not to have regrets. That is a regret. But now I'm trying to learn through this beautiful organization that we have, an opportunity to learn more. Not just the pre-colonial piece, but also, just my regular, modern history as well. And I think that's important to know because modern history helps inform why we don't know very much about the pre-colonial past of the Philippines. So, a Lance-connected Viking walk into a pandemic. In 2001, I began participating in the SCA, and mostly it's because I wanted a heavy fight because hitting other people with sticks looked really cool. And I've always been into contact sports, wrestling, rugby in college, things like that. I started off with a generic 13th century Norman persona named Roland LeBrun, or Roland the Brown, and that was my way of explaining why I look like this, right? And in fact, it was Roland the Brown and Emma the White, Emma LeBlanc, and we thought that was hilarious, which made us fit really well into Terra Primaria because they love puns. Later, I got more serious about developing a persona and developed a 16th century Swiss Landsknecht persona named Roland von Bern. And then after a while, I was knighted in September 2006. We served as Baron and Baroness for several years. And after that, my family needed a break, and our kids were in high school. And so we stepped away from the FCA, and unfortunately, we probably stepped away a little too long because we missed out on a lot of opportunities and to be with you great people and see the things and enjoy the things that we've missed so much. But then in 2019, I decided I'm going to come back, and I started going to fighter practice because I love fighting. And then we all know what happened in the early months of 2020. The plague hit, and then a Lance-connected Viking walked into a pandemic, and a Filipino walked out. And then I saw a picture of a shield, and this is a similar version. This is the shield that I made. It's a Kalasag. It's similar to a Filipino shield used by it's used mostly by the southern Filipinos in Mindanao, but I wanted to see if I could make it and use it in SCA combat, and I have, and I'm not very good with it, and it resulted in quite the butt kicking for me. And now it's getting beat up, and I'm putting it away because I want to put it on the wall, and I'll come up with something else. So, so I made this shield, and I was encouraged to display it at Athenaeum, and I really received some outstanding feedback from the people that commented on it, and I never really thought about the pursuit of. I mean, I've always been involved in making stuff, ANS stuff for me, but never really serious about study and analysis and walking that path. And so that's how this all started. So I'm going to go over some basics because there are several things that we have to know and understand before we dive deep into the challenges that this research involves. A basic understanding of geography and ethno-linguistic diversity of the Philippines is the first thing, I think, and we'll talk about that a little bit. A high-level understanding of some key points of prehistoric anthropology and human migration patterns. I think that's important. And then finally, a general understanding of the history of the Philippines post-European contact, because like I said, that will help inform why we know how little we know. And if this photo is a picture of some of the drawings that are in one of the only primary sources that we have, and it's the Boxer Codex, which is an outstanding catalog of all of the peoples and animals and natural history that the explorers came into contact in Asia. So the Philippines 101. The Philippines is an archipelago or a group of islands that is situated in the Western Pacific Ocean. It consists of around 7,000 islands that are broadly categorized under three main geographical divisions. From the north, in this orange section, that is Luzon, or the Luzones area. And then the central islands in the kind of the yellow, those are the Visayan Islands. And those are the islands that I'm primarily interested in because that's where my mother's from. And then the green islands is Mindanao, and those are that's one of the only areas that was never completely colonized and conquered by the Spanish because it had already adopted a primarily Islamic culture from the trade with Islamic traders. So the Philippines was named Las Islas Filipinas after Prince Philip, later King Philip II of Spain, by the Spanish explorer Ruy Lopez Villalobos, during his 1542 to 1546 expedition. And that is a great resource. His documents have been good writing. When I can get it translated into a language that I can speak, like English, because that's what I speak. I do not speak Spanish, and I will need to learn some Spanish to continue with this. I've learned that many of the resources, some of the best resources, are in Spanish. They're going to be in Chinese. They're going to be in Malaysian, because those are the people that documented their contacts in the time. My people, yeah, they didn't write. They had a written language, and we'll talk about that, but they didn't write down their history. They have an oral history tradition, and they passed it mouth to mouth, right? Storyteller to storyteller. What they did write, it was all about business contracts, and they wrote them on things like banana leaves, which are all gone. They just deteriorate. So that's part of why we know little about their history. So continuing, the Philippines is currently inhabited by more than 182 ethno-linguistic groups. Well, I think that's important to note because much like the North American Native Americans, it's almost it would be improper to say that the Filipinos are one people. They have, each ethnic group has their own language. In fact, when I was there, and this is one of the things that stuck with me, we were in Manao, and 5 miles down the road to the next village, the next barrio, they spoke a completely different language. That's why Tagalog is so important, and English now, because that way it was common. They could speak that common and do business with each other. But if you just spoke your own language in that other town, nobody would understand you. And so you have a wide, diverse group of ethnic groups that are individual peoples, and so that also contributes why they don't have a solid national identity today. As of 2021, the Philippines had a population of around 109 million people. I read yesterday that the Philippines is currently the fastest growing economy in Asia. And that's another thing I wanted to point out that I didn't put it in here, but a lot of people don't realize, some people do, but a lot of people don't realize that the Philippines is considered Asian or Southeast Asian. And Filipino Americans like me, for a long time, when we get our census or our W-2 or whatever, and we do our forms, a lot of us will pick Pacific Islander because they're islands and they're in the Pacific, right? But it's largely due to past racism and scrutiny in the United States. And it's cooler to be like Jason Momoa in The Rock than it is to be, like me. So, I mean, if you had a choice to be me or to expand, which one would you pick? So, I mean,
I think you.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So it has a tropical climate. The entire archipelago is part of the Pacific volcanic ring of fire, and the islands have substantial biodiversity. So we're going to cruise through this. The Visayas. So these are the islands that I'm really interested in. There are 6,000 of the 7,000 islands in the Visayas, and so that tells you how many peoples are in that area. My family is from this little island right there. See this one, Leyte, or that small island. There is Baliran. That is where we are from. So the prehistoric period is pre-900, and I will have all of this, by the way. All of this PowerPoint will be on my website. I have a website. The prehistoric period is pre-900, but the people, the inhabitants of the Philippines have been on the archipelago a very, very long time. But then you have to understand the Austronesian expansion. The people that were there may not be, the indigenous people are not the people like me, right? The Visayans, they came from different places. Like the current theory, popular theory, is the wave of migration that was waves of migration hypothesis by Otley Beyer, and he said that the people came from, or actually, that's out of favor now. That they came from Malaysia and India, and the current one, popular theory, is the out of Taiwan theory, which is that the people came down from the north into Luzon and throughout the islands, and then out into Polynesia. And I personally think that both are true. And I'll explain why I think both are true. That the waves of migration theory fits an oral tradition called the Monogathes, which was allegedly disproven as a fan fiction in the 1900s. And but then later on, the person that said that it wasn't true kind of recanted right before he died and said, well, it might be true. It's just not 100% accurate because it had that other person's, the author's spin on it, which is the way oral traditions work. So the pre-colonial period, this is what I'm interested in. This is the period in which Magellan made contact. The arrival of Ferdinand Magellan, the Portuguese explorer leading a fleet for Spain, marked the beginning of Spanish colonization. And that right there is when most Filipinos today in the Philippines believe history began. They don't really understand much about prior to the Spanish occupation. There was 300 years of Spanish rule. Then there was the Philippine Revolution, then became entwined with the Spanish-American War. The Spanish-American War ended with the Philippines thinking that they were out from the rule of Spain and that they were independent. But the Treaty of Paris gave the United States an opportunity to purchase the Philippines for $20 million. And so that led to the American colonial period, which is actually a pretty dark period because that's where the United States developed what's called the water cure. And today we call that waterboarding. There was a genocide in Samar where this is a quote about the Balinga massacre that gave officers the justification to pursue harsher methods. General Jacob Smith led the charge in Samar, and he gave the following instructions. I want no prisoners. I wish you to kill and burn, and the more you kill and burn, the better you will please me. I want all persons killed who are capable of bearing arms and actual hostilities against the United States. Major Littleton Waller asked to know the age limit, and Smith replied, 10 years. These orders were immortalized in a cartoon in the New York Journal, whose caption read, kill everyone over 10 criminals because they were born 10 years before we took the Philippines. Smith asked his men to turn Samar into a howling wilderness, which is a reference to the Bible, and they obliged. That Samar is the large island right next to Lake Cave, where my family's from. And so those are atrocities committed by the Americans. I'll tell you this right now, the Filipinos committed the same type of atrocities. They did horrible things. And so it's not one-sided. This isn't about America is bad. You know, I'm an American, love America. But it just shows that the American occupation impacted because it ended up with the a loss of significant amount of life, and people that were, the only people who would remember anything were 10, right? At least in Samar. Next, the Japanese occupation, 1942 and 1945. The Filipinos fought right along the side with the Americans in World War II and served with distinction. Following that liberation, we had a short post-independence period that was marked by nationalism, which in this case may not be like the nationalism we are experiencing here. it might have been actually a good thing because they needed a national identity. But it was short-lived because in at 7:15 on September 23rd, 1972, right before I was born, in December, President Ferdinand Marcos announced martial law, and that began 21 years of dictatorship and oppression that was marked by unbelievable poverty, inflation, human rights violations, 3,257 known extrajudicial killings, 35,000 documented tortures, 77 forced disappearances, and 70,000 incarcerations. This kind of history is why Filipinos don't know their history. It reminded me very much of the Khmer Rouge in the Killing Fields movie, if you've ever seen that, in Cambodia. They got rid of everybody that had any knowledge. And so these days, people are struggling to reinvent that history. And so first, I tell you all of this because of the tremendous ethno-linguistic diversity, and it explains why these people don't have a cohesive understanding of who they are. Second, colonization, occupation impacts the national identity and sense of who they are and their history. Third, poverty and educational systems were influenced heavily by outside forces, whoever was in control. And that definitely skews the pre-colonial view. Fourth, environmental factors have impacted our ability to have primary sources like writings. We have one piece of metal called the Laguna copper plate that has a form of pre-colonial Filipino writing that is kind of like Sanskrit that survived, but it's about a contract and so of servitude. So it doesn't tell us a lot about their history. Fifth, there are a lot of competing interests modern social elements, including pop culture, social justice movements, political perspectives, cosplay, racism, that are impacting the Filipino diaspora with false information because people don't know what to believe. I do my research and I'm inundated with something, and I'm like, oh, that sounds good, and I'll find something that looks legit, and then later on I find out I'm wrong. I'm going to tell you right now, I have been wrong more times than I've been right. Finally, there's another thing that contributes to the challenges in this research is that the perception that the Filipino culture, if you're talking about the modern Filipino culture, is largely influenced by being the sum of their contacts with outsiders. So we've had a lot of conversations about in the SCA recently about cultural appropriation. Filipinos are masters at cultural appropriation, very much like the Romans. They would adopt things that they liked, right, and things that benefited them. For instance, the Spanish written language, they stopped using Babayan, the indigenous writing system, for contracts because they could write and learn Spanish easier and trade easier. So they just adopted that. So I think that's something that we also have to understand, that a lot of things that are lost are not necessarily due to cultures imposing it on it, but internal choices. So my experiences in the SCA doing this research, Number one, it's difficult finding legit sources because of all the things I've mentioned. Second, I've experienced nothing but tremendous support, and I appreciate that. I encourage people to do this, but the problem is there's a lot of this. A lot of the conversations about cultural appropriation, people are afraid to engage. When we were Prince and Princess, I wanted people to engage and share this with me, and it's a perfect opportunity for us to learn together about this culture. But I get it. People don't want to be told they're cultural appropriating and they're racist, and I totally get that. But in the confines of education, I think that is a safe way to do it. And we just need to learn to do it respectfully. And I think you have to also understand some cultures are more willing to share and say, hey, please do this with me. And other cultures, they will teach you about it, but they don't want you to do it. So engage with the people that are doing this research and learn about what the boundaries for that particular culture are. Overwhelming support. I have been told that I've inspired people to do this type of research for their personal culture. I've been contacted by people in the East Kingdom, the Outlands, all over Kaid, and for that I'm grateful. But that's not why I did it. I did it really for that blonde-haired, blue-eyed kid, generations from now that's wondering why they're eating lumpia at Thanksgiving. So in conclusion, there are significant challenges in this research. Some can be overcome. Some can be overcome by work on my part. For instance, learning the language, traveling to the Philippines, making contacts in the area of study, finding more primary sources from outside of the culture, like I mentioned before. Some might not be able to be overcome. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Some might not be able to be overcome because we just don't have the information. And then there are just some that just may need to be acknowledged that the resources are they are what they are. They're oral traditions, and they may not be 100% historically accurate, but they are reflective of the culture. And so I encourage people that are judging these types of competitions or these kinds of projects to keep that in mind when they're doing that. I'm not saying change the standard by any stretch of the imagination, but just keep that in mind when you're taking a look at these kinds of things. I also think that the challenges that I'm facing are very similar to other people that have done this kind of research. For instance, the people that did the early research on the Scythian culture, they didn't have a written language. They didn't have a whole lot of extant pieces. They probably have more than I do because the cold there preserves things versus the humidity just rots things. So there's similarities though, and I think for me and people doing this kind of research can learn and stand on the shoulders of those that have done that kind of research in the past. Nevertheless, the research is rewarding, and it broadens the knowledge for our entire society, our SCA. That this is the Middle Ages period wasn't just in Europe; it was the whole world. The whole world had a 16th century. I mean, it was so there's a whole lot more to the world, and And for those that are researching out their own heritages, it helps us understand where we came from, and a lot of that is not something that I can really tell you. It's something that you have to experience. And I don't think that this is limited to people that are in a non-European persona. I think that if you are Irish, right, research your Irish history. I'm not saying change your persona like I did, but research it, learn. I mean, there's so much out there, and it's so rewarding to help you know where you're from. At least that has been my experience. I think I've already gone over my next slide, my encouragements, and I think that's it. Thank you so much for your time. I think we're out. If you have more, if you have questions, you want to know more, I'm happy to talk about this. I'll talk about this all day. So
thank you very much. In the interest of interest, we can, if you're willing, we take a question or two.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
And out of respect for the classes and the teachers that are starting at 9 o'clock, we'll limit that to just a couple of minutes. And then at 9:30 here, we have the Bardic competition. So are there any questions for Timawa Bato?
Here, Grace, having a suggestion here.
Of course.
At 9 o'clock, the wall's going to come up, so it's going to be a little bit loud. And court will be starting in the morning here pretty soon. So if you want to keep talking and answer questions, we can start moving.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's even better then.
So you mentioned lumpia like 5 times.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the challenges around the most important aspect of our history, which is food, because if we don't eat, we die.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so I actually was curious about lumpia because I love it, and it's so very famous in our culture. It is actually from China. It's from China. It's like a spring roll or an egg roll or whatever, but they changed it slightly. But it actually does. There are recipes that predate and documentation that predate Spanish contact. So it is a pre-colonial food. There are other foods like I don't know if you've ever heard of chicken adobo or pork adobo, which adobo is the Spanish word for marinate. And so in the Philippines, they wouldn't have called it adobo. We call it adobo now, but they would have called it something else. And I found a very similar recipe for something that my grandfather apparently was his favorite dish, called pork humba. And it is it's marinated in coconut vinegar, and you marinate it in coconut vinegar with onions, peppercorns, and garlic, and then you boil it and braise it in that, and then you pull it out, that pork belly out, and then you pan fry it so it's crispy, and you serve it with rice and the sauce with it. And so it's there are cookbooks out there. I found a couple on pre-colonial Filipino dishes.
A lot of fish.
Yeah, it's very, very fish. You see food related, obviously, but I'm like, remember, I'm an American. I'm trying
a lot of fish.
trying to learn to like fish. So, yeah.
I've been asked to get your website address.
Yeah, I'll have to give it to you when I can look it up. I think it's I think I can't remember. I have a WordPress and I think it is like I can't remember, the Pre-Colonial Philippine project or something like that.
Okay. I'll get it from Emma.
Yeah.
So when I was in the Army, and there was a 25th Infantry out of Hawaii that was taking over our job. And, rather than questions about radios or defense, the first question was, how do we get a pig?
in Iraq. And through the Filipino connection, we were able to get a pig for them for their in-breath. When did that? Is that a Spanish to bring the pig to them? Or they still
I think that I think the Spanish did bring pigs to the type of pig that they have. There is an indigenous pig, but it's extinct now. So what they had primarily was probably their indigenous pig or pigs from China, but or Taiwan, but. Anything else before we let them set up for court and we get on with the event? Yeah.
I guess my question is, what sort of place do you look for sources? Do you like contact museums, or do you try to look up books? Or?
Yeah. So that's been challenging. I've been very fortunate with we have some people within An Tir that work in universities, and they've been able to get me interlibrary loan online versions for documents, but so far my contacts with museums in the Philippines have been fruitless. They're just not interested in talking to me at this point. So I'm gonna go over there and someday get in their face and say, hey, tell me. So let me see it. So thank you, everybody.
You can take your earrings out now.
Just a quick announcement for the people running the site. Remember, if you haven't been through gate yet that opened this morning, please go through gate.